2017, there's a new president in power and shockwaves rippling around the world. What on earth is happening?
I think the basic thing that happens is that we have lost our story. Humans think in stories, and we try to make sense of the world by telling stories. And for the last few decades, we had a very simple and very attractive story about what's happening in the world. And the story said that, what's happening is that the economy is being globalized, politics is being liberalized, and the combination of the two will create paradise on earth. And we just need to keep on globalizing the economy and liberalizing the political system, and everything will be wonderful. And 2016 is the moment when a very large segment, even of the Western world, stopped believing in this story. For good or bad reason, doesn't matter. People stopped believing in the story. And when you don't have a story, you don't understand what's happening.
I mean, part of you believes that that story was actually a very effective story. It worked.
To some extent, yes. I mean, according to some measurements, we are now in the best time ever for humankind. Today, for the first time in history, more people die from eating too much than from eating too little, which is an amazing achievement. Also, for the first time in history, more people die from old age than from infectious diseases. And violence is also down. For the first time in history, more people commit suicide than are killed by crime and terrorism and war put together. Statistically, you are your own worst enemy. At least from all the people in the world, you're most likely to be killed by yourself. Which is, again, very good news compared to the level of violence that we saw in previous eras.
But this process of connecting the world ended up with a large group of people kind of feeling left out. Mm-hmm. And they've reacted, and so we have this bombshell that's sort of rippling through the whole system. I mean, how do you make of what's happened? It feels like the old way that people thought of politics, the left-right divide, has been blown up and replaced. How should we think of this?
Yeah, the old 20th century political model of left versus right is now largely irrelevant. And the real divide today is between global and national, or global or local. And you see it, again, all over the world, that this is now the main struggle. We probably need completely new political models and completely new ways of thinking about politics. In essence, what you can say is that we now have global ecology, we have a global economy, but we have national politics. And this doesn't work together. This makes the political system ineffective because it has no control over the forces that shape our life. And you have basically two solutions to this imbalance. Either deglobalize the economy and turn it back into a national economy, or globalize the political system.
So some, I guess many liberals out there view Trump and his
again, and I don't think this can work, but a lot of people, this is their gut instinct.
But why couldn't it work? I mean, America First is a very appealing slogan in many ways. Patriotism is in many ways a very noble thing. It's played a role in promoting cooperation among large numbers of people. Why couldn't you have a world organized in countries, all of which put themselves first?
For many centuries, even thousands of years, patriotism worked quite well. Of course, it led to wars and so forth, but we shouldn't focus too much on the bad. There are also many, many positive things about patriotism and the ability to have a large number of people care about each other, sympathize with one another, and come together for collective action. If you go back to the First Nations, so thousands of years ago, the people who lived along the Yellow River in China, it was many, many different tribes. And they all depended on the river for survival and for prosperity, but all of them also suffered from periodical floods and periodical droughts. And no tribe could really do anything about it because each of them controlled just a tiny section of the river. And then in a long and complicated process, the tribes coalesced together to form the Chinese nation, which controlled the entire Yellow River and had the ability to bring hundreds of thousands of people together to build dams and canals and regulate the river and prevent the worst floods and droughts and raise the level of prosperity for everybody. And this worked in many places around the world. But in the 21st century, technology is changing all that in a fundamental way. We are now living, all people in the world are living alongside the same cyber river. And no single nation can regulate this river by itself. We are all living together in a single planet, which is threatened by our own actions. And if you don't have some kind of global cooperation, nationalism just is not on the right level to tackle the problems of whether it's climate change or whether it's technological disruption.
So it was a beautiful idea in a world where most of the action, most of the issues took place on national scale. Mm-hmm. But your argument is that the issues that matter most today no longer take place on a national scale, but on a global scale.
Exactly. All the major problems of the world today are global in essence, and they cannot be solved unless through some kind of global cooperation. It's not just climate change, which is like the most obvious example people give. I think more in terms of technological disruption. If you think about, for example, artificial intelligence, over the next 20, 30 years, pushing hundreds of millions of people out of the job market, this is a problem on a global level. It will disrupt the economy of all the countries. And similarly, if you think about, say, bioengineering and people being afraid of conducting, genetic engineering research on humans, it won't help if just a single country let's say the US, outlaws all genetic experiments on humans. But China or North Korea continues to do it. So the US cannot solve it by itself, and very quickly the pressure on the US to do the same will be immense, because we are talking about high-risk, high-gain technologies. If somebody else is doing it, I can't allow myself to remain behind. The only way to have regulations, effective regulations on things like genetic engineering, is to have global regulations. If you just have national regulations, nobody would like to stay behind.
So this is really operate as a connected world.
Yeah, I think that, I don't know about the present, but looking to the future, it's not the Mexicans or Chinese who will take the jobs from the people in Pennsylvania. It's the robots and algorithms.
Yeah, no.
Technological and economic revolution empowered the human collective. But when you look at actual individual lives, the life of a tiny elite became much better, and the life of the majority of people became considerably worse. On the African savannah, tens of thousands of years ago, to cope with a particular environment, a particular volume of information and data, it just can't handle the realities of the 21st century. And the only thing that may be able to handle it is big data algorithms. So no wonder that more and more authority is shifting from us to the algorithms. So I think with climate change, at first sight, it's quite surprising that there is a very close correlation between nationalism and climate change. I mean, almost always the people who deny climate change are nationalists.
Into it, and Facebook get them
20, I don't know. Would this be part of the basket of basic income or not? It's a very difficult problem, because in a world when people lose their ability to be employed, the only thing they're going to get is this basic income. So what's part of it is a very, very difficult ethical question.
And there's a bunch of questions on how the world affords it as well. Who pays? The numbers are daunting. There's a question here from Facebook from Lisa Last.
A single person lost her life. An MP who was murdered by some extremist. Just a single person. I mean, if Brexit was about British independence, this is the most peaceful war of independence in human history. And if, let's say that Scotland will now choose to leave the UK after Brexit. So in the 18th century, if Scotland wanted, and the Scots wanted several times, to break out of the control of London, the reaction of the government in London was to send an army up north to burn down Edinburgh and massacre the Highland tribes. My guess that if in 2018 the Scots vote for independence, the London government will not send an army up north to burn down Edinburgh. Very few people are now willing to kill or be killed for Scottish or for British independence. So for all the talk of the rise of nationalism and going back in the 1930s or to the 19th century, in the West at least, the power of national sentiments today is far, far smaller than it was a century ago.
Well, there's some
model for that.
Hey guys, real quick, let me give you a tip on Udemy. Right now they're having a huge sale, so click or tap to find a...
The main
problems for the future.
Yes, it's another very good case, especially because it's so much easier to migrate today than it was in the Middle Ages or in ancient times.
Yvonne, there's a belief
to me that the world situation is in the hands of identity groups. We look at people within the United States who have been recruited by ISIS. We look at these other groups which have formed, which go outside of national bounds but still represent significant authorities. How are they to be integrated into the system, and how is a diverse set of identities to be made coherent under either national or global leadership?
Well, the problem of such diverse identities is a problem for nationalism as well. Nationalism believes in a single monolithic identity. Nations that exists today existed 5,000 years ago. Homo sapiens is a social animal, that's for sure, but for millions of years, Homo sapiens and our hominid ancestors lived in small communities. AI that humans can do better than robots, they usually think about high-skilled jobs like software engineers designing virtual worlds. Now, I don't see how an unemployed cashier from Walmart reinvents herself or himself at 50 as a designer of virtual worlds, and certainly I don't see how the millions of unemployed Bangladeshi textile workers will be able to do that. I mean, if they're going to do it, we need to start teaching the Bangladeshis today how to be software designers, and we are not doing it. So what will they do in 20 years?
So it feels like you're really highlighting a question that's really been bugging me almost the last few months, more and more. It's almost a hard question to ask in public, but if any mind has some wisdom to offer in it, maybe it's yours. So I'm going to ask you, what are humans for?
As far as we know, for nothing. I mean, there is no great cosmic drama, some great cosmic plan that we have a role to play in it. And we just need to discover what our role is and then play it to the best of our ability. This has been the story of all religions and ideologies and so forth, but as a scientist, the best I can say, this is not true. There is no universal drama with a role in it for Homo sapiens. I'm going to push back on you just on a minute, just from your own book, because in Homo Deus, you give really one of the most coherent and understandable accounts about sentience, about consciousness, and that unique sort of human skill. You point out that it's different from intelligence, the intelligence that we're building in machines, and that there's actually a lot of mystery around it. How can you be sure there's no purpose when we don't even understand what this sentience thing is? I mean, in your own thinking, isn't there a chance that what humans are for are to be the universe's sentient things, to be the centers of joy and love and happiness and hope? And maybe we can build machines that actually help amplify that, even if they're not going to become sentient themselves. Is that crazy? I thought I kind of found myself hoping that, reading your book. Oh. Well, I certainly think that the most interesting question today in science is the question of consciousness and the mind. We are getting better and better in understanding the brain and intelligence, but we are not getting much better in understanding the mind and consciousness. People often confuse intelligence and consciousness, especially in places like Silicon Valley, which is understandable because in humans, they go together. I mean, intelligence basically is the ability to solve problems. Consciousness is the ability to feel things, to feel joy and sadness and boredom and pain and so forth. In Homo sapiens and all other mammals as well, it's not unique to humans. In all mammals and birds and some other animals, intelligence and consciousness go together. We often solve problems by feeling things. So we tend to confuse them. But they are different things. What's happening today in place of the question of what is it for, I would reverse it. And I would say that I don't think sentience is for anything. I think we don't need to find our role in the universe. The really important thing is to liberate ourselves from suffering. What characterizes sentient beings, in contrast to robots, to stones, to whatever, is that sentient beings suffer. Can be difficult, but reality is there. For me, the best, several tests to tell the difference between fiction and reality. The simplest one, the best one that I can say in short, is the test of suffering. If it can suffer, it's real.
Truth mattered. So if you believe in a reality, then what you write is information. There was a belief that that information should connect to a reality in a real way, and that if you wrote a headline, it was a serious and earnest attempt to reflect something that had actually happened. And people didn't always get it right. But I think the concern now is that you've got a technological system that's incredibly powerful, that for a while at least, massively amplified anything with no attention paid to whether it connected to reality, only to whether it connected to clicks and attention. And there's a lot of interest in Facebook.
Do you have a PhD but nobody's coming to your LinkedIn profile? That's a problem. If you want to get hired into industry, you...
On Facebook on this question
of Homo sapiens. Today, in the 21st century, we need both the global level and the local community. And I would go even further than that and say that it starts with the body itself, in the world also.
Well, depending on how things go, we may
have a global governance, and if we suffer from climate change, from technological disruptions, the worst suffering will not be in the US. The worst suffering will be in Ghana, will be in Sudan, will be in Syria, will be in...
Here you go. You could debate about globalism and nationalism. So I just found this discussion very interesting as a kind of eye-opening in relation to how we see the world around us and what is the best solution. As you know, even if there are a lot of nice developments in technology in our today's world, we also have a lot of problems. And we are here in this world, in this planet, to do our best so that we could contribute something positive. So it's good sometimes just to pause and ask ourselves actually, what are we doing? Where are we heading? And what is my role? What is our role during this journey? So it looks like always there is something to debate about. There are a lot of topics to debate about in this world. And one of the debates today is about globalism and nationalism. And I hope this begins. This can be a starting point to start a debate, a discussion. Here you go for youth education support service. እና ወዳጆች ስለ ግሎባሊዝም እና ናሽናሊዝም ዓለም አቀፋዊነት ነው ወይስ ሀገር ላይ የተኮረ ዓለም ነው የምንፈልገው የሚል ውይይት ተደርጓል። አይሆፕ ከዚህ ብዙ ትማራላችሁ። በየራሳችሁም ደግሞ ውይይት ብትጀምሩ በጣም አሪፍ ነው። መልካም ጊዜ እመኛለሁ በያላችሁበት። ከኢትዮጵያ ወጣቶችና ትምህርት ድጋፍ አገልግሎት ቻው።